Hi there. Good afternoon. I'm so happy to see you. I'm Dr. Robin Gould, and welcome to the program. I'm so glad you're here today on LMNetwork.tv, and I'm glad that you're joining me to have a little bit of time to discuss some things that are we're touching on the portion a little bit, but I think we're going to extend the scope a little bit of what we're talking about. I think you might find it interesting because the future begins now. And I want you to remember that because what you will probably find interesting today is, uh, I think, conversations that are circling the globe right now. I think these are things that people are talking about right now. So is it a right now word? I don't know. It is for me. So and I'm kind of saying that a little bit sarcastically because, that term, it's a right now word, which I feel like every word of the Torah is a right now word. But I think right now there is some things illuminated to us that we are needing to really learn relationally and from an attachment perspective. And I'm an attachment specialist. So that is the avenue I am traveling on in any vehicle I can find. So the future begins now. Let's get started on what we're talking about. Since we don't have that much time, we have about 50 minutes. So let's start by just doing a little recap on my basic premise, because this is what I think in Genesis is the most foundational thing in the entire Bible. It sets up the Bible. We talk about Adam and Hava, or you might have learned of them as Adam and Eve. So the very first thing that humans did and the way it was dealt with, what their proclivities were, what the default settings were in terms of how they rigidly formed them as humans, not saying the Father causes people to sin, but the default setting of free agency, right? It could go either way. You could do something right or you could do something wrong, but we have free will. And so the premise I always predicate everything on, I always go, every time I study anything, I always go back to two things. Number one, how does this fit in with the very first story we're given about humanity? Because it sets up what humanity is and what humanity does and how the Father deals with that. That story is not there just because it's an interesting story, and it's a fascinating story, short as it is. It's there to tell you how to think about things. The second piece that I always encompass all my study and thoughts and opinions on are, how does this, at the same time, all three of these things, it loves God with everything in you and your neighbor as yourself. Yourself as your neighbor and God. God rises to that level of worship where we love each other evenly as humans. Okay, so that very first story, I barely have had a program here where I haven't brought it up, where Adam and Hava wanted to have the knowledge of good and evil. They wanted to know the difference between good and evil. They wanted their eyes opened to be like God, but they were humans and not God. So, do they have the ability to know the difference between good and evil? No. Now, it does say their eyes were opened. Now, do we see things the way God sees things? Clearly, no, right? The Father is a helicopter. We're watching the parade. Okay, we see from our periphery, we see directly in front of us. We don't know overall everything going on. Many of us like to think we do, and many of us like to act that way. To the detriment of the body of Yeshua, right? This is not the way to live. And what results from trying to be like God instead of embracing and accepting our humanity the way we were designed by the Father? What happens with that? You hear the lawnmower? Okay, sorry about the noise and the allergies. Okay, but back to Adam and Hava. They do not have the ability to think like God, but they wanted it. Okay, now when you want to compete with your parent has to show you can't, lest you die. So My parent says I can't run out into traffic. Well, you know what? I'm going to do that. You might die, okay? You might die. But I think this is even from a deeper perspective. You die in your in he makes you in the image of him, but you aren't him. Okay? So there's some things that are in the image of, but you are you. You are a human. And being a human is good. Competing with God is bad. Okay? So, am I judging good and evil? I believe it is evil to think we can possess the power of God. Yes, I do think that's evil. So, do I believe the people are evil doing that and I know they're intentionally doing that? I do not know. Okay, so I'm not judging people as good or evil. I don't know if people's actions are good or evil because there's intent. And the piece of the portion that we're touching in on, it talks about the priesthood and sins and offerings and everything like that, sacrifices. But you'll see the word intentional and unintentional. So what's interesting is that we can sin unintentionally and we can sin intentionally. Do we repent for both? Yes. But we figure it out and we do the appropriate action when we come to understand our sin, right? And as we age and mature, we learn where we've sinned and we figure out how to stop doing that sin. And once we figure out how to stop doing it, we stop doing it. Okay. That's the life. I could drop Mike here. We're done. Like that's how life is, right? So Eve wanted to possess the ability to know the difference between good and evil, which put her in competition with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who made her and who put her in the position to not know those things, but to obey and listen to him tell you. Sorry, this is a 11 allergy day. And I have a feeling you're going to see that Kleenex for our whole 50 minutes. And I'm going to drink water. Okay. I swear it's like, wasn't as bad until literally I went on air and literally the lawnmower started. Okay, so let's go on. Now, a lot of the times, like okay, let's just talk about controlling people, bossy people, know-it-alls, right? Now, there are some people I know, they are just not know-it-alls. They are absolutely humble, which from my definition and what I think that really means, particularly from a Musar perspective, is that you appreciate the self you were given. Okay. Moshe appreciated the self he was given. He didn't try to be something he wasn't, but he let the Father direct him, and he knew he was born of this, he was raised this, he escaped this, he came back to this, he did this. Okay. And Moshe was special in this way. So there are people, I have friends and a circle of women in particular, just really great friends, and they don't think they know everything. And when we are together and we're talking and these are the people I gravitate to, they're not like, I know everything. I've got everything under control. I know what's going on. And they're open to other people's ideas. They don't need to be controlling. That is a beautiful type of relationship. When you find those relationships, cling to them. They're really important because the other ones will just wear you out and stress you out and can be a stumbling block as you are trying to walk out your faith, okay? Because people who are know-it-alls, they think that they know what's good and bad when they don't. And the people that I admire the most and that I'm closest to are the people that so often will always have that reminder in their own life. And we always will talk about this like, okay, so this person just seems like they're a know-it-all. They seem so entitled, like They're entitled in a way where, like let's say social media, they write this long post about themselves thinking people are interested. And some people are. I'm not saying they aren't, but do we look at that person as so horrifically entitled? To me, that is just so weird that people do that day after day. But at the same time, who am I to think that? Right. And so my friends were kind of accountable to each other, like, well, that could be something they really feel in their heart helps other people, and like really think that helps people. So we can't really know what's going on in another person's life. And when we think we do, and we think we understand them, and we cast our judgments on them, it's so damaging. Now, that person will probably just back away from you if you do that, if they're smart, because they'll realize that you are immature and you're not in a place where you can hear another person's experience or difference of opinion, or you just think you know. And I'm telling you, you see this, you know what I'm talking about. But a lot of the things that you think are bad are actually good, right? But now, from the Father's perspective, some of the things we can think are good, the Father could see as bad. Like, we don't know how a father operates when we're just a 2-year-old. And I say this so frequently on this program because I continue to want to remind you not to lose faith or be afraid of things you don't understand. Celebrate that, because we don't understand because we're 2. And so we are children. We are coming to the Father. He says, come as children, right? Children trust their parent. They don't think they know more than their parent, but they do know what they want and if they're not getting it. That's what a child knows, right? So, and I use this example all the time. Like when we were little kids, we never understood why our parents didn't buy like 75 bags of M&Ms at the store when they had the money, when that's really what we want, or they limited how many M&Ms we could have, right? We know that now that we're more mature, that our parent was preventing us from being unhealthy and being sick, or spoiling our dinner, or whatever, getting a really bad stomach ache. If you've ever overeaten candy as a child, you learn that lesson, right? Well, 2-year-olds don't know these things. Humility is appreciating the self you're given. What's the self we're given? A human self that does not understand God, but can attach to and trust and follow and love God. But this pursuit of knowledge of, I can understand God and explain exactly God to people. You can't do that. And this leads to really bad flaws in our character and in our communication and in our relationships. And it's a stumbling block to others. So I want to go into this intentionality idea. Okay. Kavanaugh, right? I want to talk about this because what we think the Father could be doing something that we think is like bad and against us. It could be the best. I'm sure it is the best thing that could happen to us. And sometimes we think the Father is really, really doing something good, when really it could be not that the Father's doing something bad, but there can be a test there. There could be, it's not always like this is the best thing that's happening. Sometimes it's a neutral thing. We don't really know. But what I'm saying is that when we impose a judgment to something that it's good, bad, or evil, or whatever, we are forgetting our place. We're forgetting that we're the humans, not the God. And so when you think about toiling, right? So when Adam and Chava are driven from the garden, he's like, you are going to toil in the soil by the sweat of your brow. You will eat bread. So he's telling us like it's going to be hard. Now, if you read you talk about covenants, the salt covenant, right? These are, I want you to read the whole portion and the things that are attached to that, because there are layers attached to this that's so interesting, but I'll just bring up a few here. But when you think about the salt covenant, right? And you think about salt, okay, so sweat, because we're talking about the sweat of your brow. Now, in the human body, we sweat and have tears. Those are 2 places where you will find salt. And salt in biblical days was used as a preservative. And salt is important. You could use salt to destroy land so it can grow nothing. You can use salt to preserve meat so that you can store it for later, right? And there's salt in our sweat and in our tears, which to me has been always been very emotional and very symbolic to me, because it reflects that salt covenant of preservation. When we sweat, there's some form of preservation happening to our bodies and our lives. When we cry, whether it's happy tears or sad tears, there's salt in those tears. That's that salt covenant. That's a covenant of preservative. Okay, preserving. So protecting, preserving, making it last. Okay, so if salt is something that preserves us, then sweat and tears are part of the process of preservation. Okay, that's how I see it. I see those, that when we're sweating and toiling and working, we're making covenant, right? We are making a preservative covenant with the Father. And the same thing would be when we would cry out of whatever emotion that was. We're sad for ourselves, we're sad for someone else. We laughed so hard it made us cry, or something touched us and we cried. Because something was so important. Those are all, I think, covenantal behaviors your body just does, because it demonstrates intentionality, feeling, emotion. Something touched you or moved you, or you worked hard enough that you sweat, right? And so that's the preservation aspect of that. So if you think about, let's just take sweat. Okay. And how would this benefit us physically? Well, it's number one, it helps you detox, right? So stuff that needs to come out comes out. That preserves your body. You got to break a sweat. You got to do that, right? It also preserves us. We sweat because we can harvest, our labor and use it. Either we planted a garden and harvested the food by the sweat of our brow, like it says, or we went to work and struggled and got there and did everything we had to do, and we get the benefit of our work, right? Or our kid fell down a ravine and we are sweating to get the kid, we get the kid back. So it benefits us, right? It benefits us physically, because we're given the strength through sweating to cool the body down to get the kid. So this covenant of preservation benefits you. Does it benefit Abba? I think it does. I think it benefits Abba because he sees that you're invested, that you care. So I was recently watching a friend of mine that I traveled to Israel with, and she was having her birthday party, and she didn't expect her son to come from the military to be there at the party, and she was crying immediately, right? How does that affect the father? Well, what does he see? He sees a woman who loves her son, and he loves her, and he shows up to be there, and she's moved to tears because of this righteous relationship that the father planted in each of them. And that was realized. That's covenant. That's attachment covenant. That's like her tears showed covenant. A covenant she had with her son to love him. The covenant that the son solicited those tears to be there for his mom. And the covenant the father says, I will be with you and give you this abundant life. Not easy life, but abundant life. So does this help us emotionally? Well, sweat and tears, right? Yes, these things benefit us, not just physically with the release and how much better it feels like physically, but when you cry, even if it's good cry or a bad cry, they call it an ugly cry, whatever, you feel better. As those tears finally get there, right? You can feel it kind of coming up, and then all of a sudden those hot tears just come out and you're like, oh, and you cry, and then you just feel better. You're cutting that covenant. You're making that covenant. Your body is demonstrating that this salt covenant between you and your creator and your experience on the planet he put you on is intentional and real, and it's there. So emotionally, yes. Now in community, how does this benefit us? This sweating and crying, right? Sweat, tears, salt covenant. in community. Have you ever cried with a bunch of people at the same time? That is a cathartic thing. Like you're all watching the same movie and you're all like sobbing and you're like holding it like, oh my gosh, that is just so, oh my goodness, because you're connecting, right? That's good for community. We sweat as a community. You ever see the Amish build a barn for the person who it burned down or they just got married or whatever? They sweat as a community. That's part of their bonding, part of attachment. When we run marathons together, we're sweating together. We work out together. Everything we do, when we do it together, it's easier and it's better. When we sweat and we struggle through life, or we hike together, we enjoy the mountains, whatever, like it's good for community to share emotions, share experiences, be together. And then spiritually, I believe it moves the Father when we're moved by the experience of life that He's provided for us as we negotiate through it. And we look at, we're at a fork and we go this way because we think it's the best choice. And we've really thought about this and we're this and we're that. And we care, and we toil and we sweat and we have tears and we're all involved in our lives. I think that moves the Father. I think that moves us with the Father. And so we rejoice with those that are rejoicing and we mourn with those who mourn, and it's all good. All of these things are good. Now, they're good in a generic sense, and I'm not saying specifically what's particularly good. I'm saying that these are the salt preserves. It preserves community. It preserves your body. It preserves your experience. It preserves your community. These are all elements of preservation. Okay. Oh, my little doggy. He might want to be on the show today. Oh, he's walking around. I don't know if I'll have to get up and Juicy. I don't know. We have a guest today on our show. Okay. So this leads me into triangulate. Do you need to come up here? What? Come on. Do you want to lay down? Okay. So this leads me into triangulation. So this is the God is on my side syndrome that some people have. Okay. Have you ever been there? Have you ever heard that? Have you ever done that and repented? Or if you there now, or do you have a friend that's like that? Like, and you're just, oh, do you see that on TV or whatever? Okay. So that's like actually kind of going into what triangulation is. There's a lot of people like they want to triangulate God into their preference, right? Like, oh, the Father's on my side. Like God is on my side. Like I'm the righteous one here and God's on my side because I decided this and this is what I'm doing and they don't agree with me. And God is on my side because look, their car broke down. See, God's on my side. You see how that happens? Do you hear this? Like this is so toxic. And, I'm not saying I've never thought that way. I've outgrown that. But I remember how that felt to really believe that. That is a pretty savage, my dog doing. This is a pretty savage aspect of like, it's savage toward attachment. Because when we feel like a parent is triangulated and likes one kid better, now, obviously, a parent can show pleasure toward a child like, wow, look what you did. But they're not against the other child. But he loved Jacob and rejected Esau. Like the actions, yes, there's pleasure and not pleasure. But I'm talking about triangulation and like, you don't even know. Sometimes things happen, we don't know. But the Father's blessing that person. Right? So I remember one time one person told me, I just know that they got a cold. Like they're sick. And yeah, the Father just took them out of the game. Like took them, what? Like if you really believed and had faith, you wouldn't have a cold. Which is the most ridiculous thing. And I remember like back in the day when I would have, conversations, I'd be like, I have a cold right now. It doesn't mean I don't love the Father. I might have just caught a cold and I'm going to rest a day or two. Now, if anything, I always viewed this as maybe the Father just wants to slow me down and give me a break from my overthinking or whatever it was or everything I was doing. But from my perspective, I have a good Father who is operating in a preservative way toward me and giving me the things I need to be closer to him, and not like a punishing father who's like, see, I'm going to make your life fail. Okay, so, but do you see what I'm saying? Because this whole idea of us knowing that that person's plumbing failed in their house is because God's on your side and they were the wrong ones. Like, that's quite a leap, right? That's quite a leap. We need to repent of that if we think we know these things. So it disturbs attachment, right? And it can create what we would call from the Bible a stumbling block. Now, in evangelism, which is not really something that people of my faith do in the same way or believe the same way that works, but in a lot of religious settings, they would believe that a stumbling block would mean you would prevent somebody from finding the Father. Now, my faith system says nobody has that power at all. Like, literally. Could we cause somebody to stumble? Well, yeah, people stumble. But fall and get lost and never find the Lord is not stumble. Falling into a volcano that's erupting, that's different than I stumbled. I stumbled and skinned my knees and I got slowed down or whatever. So we don't want to cause people to stumble, right? We don't want to be a stumbling block for other people. But we do walk through our salvation with fear and trembling. So this is not really a fall, but a stumble. Now, what you will get is, which I hate, and I will be very upfront, that I do think that this is evil. Though, are the people doing it intentionally being evil, or are they just deceived? Probably, I don't know. That's the point. I'm a human. I'm not a helicopter. I don't get to go and see everything this person's thinking and doing. That's the Father's job. I'm not going to pretend I know these things. But I will say the doctrine of the prosperity gospel is very evil. Now, other people will disagree with me, and that's fine. But I believe it is, because I don't believe it's doctrinally sound. I believe it's destructive to attachment, so I already know it's wrong. And it's ridiculous, really. But the prosperity gospel talks about like sowing seeds. It's also kind of like word of faith, right? I'm against all of that. I just absolutely hate that. But this whole idea of like reaping what you sow. So we've talked about this in past a little bit. Let's go into it a little bit more. Okay, lay down. Here, he's finally getting comfortable. Reaping what you sow, right? I was just talking, actually, my husband and I were just having this conversation yesterday. Okay, listen, my dog is making all these little growls. Okay, so I feel like Dr. Halissa Aylwine, she always would have a dog on her lap and it would be like snoring. And she was so awesome. She never even noticed it. We'd all be like, we hear your dog. She's like, it's soothing, isn't it? You know, but yep, I've got that kind of thing going on with Jutsi. Do you want us to come see? Come here. Want to come up? He doesn't want to. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm very distracted by my dog. Everyone's gone today. And I'm alone with the geriatric patient here. But anyway, so the idea of reaping what you sow. So the prosperity gospel or the word of faith is like, you say it and God's obligated to do it, which is just, oh my goodness. Have you ever heard Rico teach on this? It's so good. He's just like, you talk to the creator. If he was right in front of you, you would say, hey, show up and do, you know. No, you would never do that. It's ridiculous. Almost implies, do you really believe there's a divine creator at that level of power? Like what? Anyway, but what they'll talk about is sowing seed. Whenever you hear people about sowing a seed, pretty much 99% of the time, run as fast as you can and leave and don't ever go back there. Sowing seed is something that people have completely misinterpreted. And the idea would be, okay, so here is sowing seed. In a true practical sense, the way I believe the Bible is actually intending this is like, okay, so you have some like vegetable seeds. Okay, come on, you can get up. He's growling a little bit. Okay. So if you, and I apologize that I'm so distracted with my dog, but I'm a real person and I have a real dog. So That's what. Okay. So let's say you sow seeds, vegetables, right, in a garden, and you sow the seed, and then you till the soil first. You sowed the seed, and then you tended to it and made sure it had enough water, enough sunlight, whatever. And then the harvest came, and you harvested some vegetables, and you took it inside your house and you chopped it up into a salad and ate it. Well, you've reaped what you sown, right? Now, the word of faith of the prosperity gospel is like, sow seed, like send $1,000 to me and you will see what the Father will do in your life. What? What do you mean? It's like this weird trade. It's almost like saying, if you sow seed in a garden, you're going to go across the street and someone's going to give you a car. Well, like, but I didn't reap a car. I mean, I didn't sow a car. I sowed seed. Okay. Now, what? That doesn't even make sense, right? That is not the same thing. That the Father's going to work like that. Like, if your heart is good and you give me $1,000, someone's going to give you $1,000 some other way. That is not even remotely believable. But if you sow seed, like, let's say you donated 1,000 Bibles to children in a third world developing country, what do you reap from that? Do you expect a check in the mail from Ed McMahon? Or is what you sow, what you reaped from, you sowed the 1,000 Bibles, and what did you reap? 1,000 kids in developing countries have a Bible now. You reap that. Yay! That should be what you're happy about, because your intentionality was to give this for the sole purpose of them having this, not for you to get something else. So if I sow a garden, I am planting a cucumber, I don't expect a car. Okay, like, what? Hey, I planted a garden, so I think somebody's going to bring me a flat screen TV. Like, what? But the prosperity gospel brags about this, and they think that this demonstrates their faithfulness and that they've got God's favor. Okay, that's insane, right? But there's hundreds of thousands of millions of people who believe this all over the place, where there's really no connection between these two things. Okay, so we're going to move on there. So a lot of people will go into this whole idea of like, you just watch that ministry fail. That person with all their flaws, you just watch that ministry fail. It's almost like people are rooting for people they don't agree with, that they are going to fail. Here, I'm going to grab my dog. Hold on. Come here. You are really needing a little attention. Okay, come here. You're going to see the little guy. This is little guy. Okay. This is little guy, and he's a little growly because I don't know why. Okay. This is Jutsi. Say hi. Okay. I'm just going to hold him because I just can't not hold him right now. Okay. So, yeah. So where was I before I picked up the dog? Hold on. I had a couple little notes here. Okay. Yeah. So people are almost celebrating, like, what would happen if that ministry failed? It would prove that God loves me. He's with me. He's on my side. Instead of like praying that ministry would succeed, but it would be, they wouldn't be stiff-necked. They could turn a little bit, and they could get wisdom and outgrow this transaction of favor that is implausible when we would attach that to attachment, when we would, put that in the world of attachment. Attachment is about a parent that takes care of you and loves you, right? Like, I love this little dog, and I take care of this dog, and this dog is obviously very attached to me. He wanted the attention, right? Like, as I'm talking to you. But attachment is everything, right? Being like this dog, when we leave, he is so upset. He wants to be near us. He wants to be close to us. Animals are a perfect example of attachment when it's innocent and unyielding, right? Well, that's how we are with the Father. We need him with us always, right? And so we're not creators. We're assemblers. But the Father is the only creator. But these other doctrines that focus on everything you're going to get, and that favor of God is demonstrated in your fleet of jets and your 2 houses, 3 houses, or all your money or whatever, that it's such a savage to your life, and it really, I believe, infects your identity, because Hava and Adam, their identity was as children of God, that he delighted in watching them live, and striving with them and seeing what they were going to do, giving them a life, and so they could live it, and he could be there and revel in their victories and help them and redirect them, right? So we have to be redirected. And that is not, if you're redirected, like a lot of times the Father will be doing something in your life and you might think, oh, this is not good. Like, I lost money, or I lost this friend, or I lost my job, or whatever. And a lot of the times we want to blame God. We want to say, this is your fault, God, when it is not. It might be a very good thing. The Father might be taking care of an area of your life that was much more important than whatever that job or that money was. There's another piece. I believe sometimes things just happen in the world because we live in a fallen world, right? It's just the way it is. But I also believe sometimes the Father will show you he's in this. He's in this with you, and he's going to help you. But sometimes we could be losing money and the Father could be blessing us with something much more important that we needed in the experience of that loss. And sometimes we could be getting money. We think, oh, we've done this great stuff or whatever. But the Father would be, saying, okay, how will you handle this? You give a kid a Game Boy. Is it going to make you closer to your parents or farther away from your parents? Well, if you don't look up for the whole weekend because you're in that Game Boy, it's gone, right? A good parent is going to be like, well, I'm the only person that's going to have your back. So if I allow this relationship to deteriorate when you're this age in your formative years, what kind of a parent am I? I'm not going to outsource your whole life to this Game Boy. That's not my babysitter for you. I want to be present, right? I want to be present with you. And so these are just some things to put. So the intentionality in today's portion is really what kind of hit me today, as to understanding what we don't understand, because it asks you, if everybody unintentionally did this, that's a real thing, unintentional sin. And but learn, right? Start learning about, say something to somebody and then ask them later, hey, the way I said that, did that help or hurt or what? And if they say, it was helpful information, but the delivery did hurt my feelings. Okay, that is information I need to know. So I should share the information, but maybe I need to work on my delivery. Okay. You don't want to hurt people's feelings and be a stumbling block. And that person needs to toughen up a little too, right? And they have to be honest and tell you. But intentionality is everything. It is not going to, you can have a good intention and not, so you can appear to have a good intention and say, hey, I had a good intention, and you can be a manipulator. And that's between you and the Father to work that out. But intentionality and understanding and knowing what you don't know, and having the humility to say, hey, I don't know that. That's one of my favorite things to say. I don't know. And I don't even know if I can point you toward the answer, but I can ask around because I know people that know more than me. I mean, some people just think like, oh, that would take away from my credibility, but I disagree. I like people I can trust, and they say, I don't know, I've never really given that a lot of thought, or I've never researched it, and I can't tell you. But the know-it-all, right? They have to be right all the time. I feel like that person is really missing out on living an abundant life, because They just think they know everything. They think they know better than you. They're just that's a very difficult life. Now, do I judge that person as evil? No. Maybe they had a parent who marginalized them. Maybe they really do feel like their identity is in their knowledge. And the father needs to be that great physician, and I can't be, or whatever. But a lot of people that have the false self of the controller, the know-it-all, they often are doing that because they feel worthless unless they are bringing something to the table, and that might be a strength they have, because a lot of the times it's our gifts that can kind of take us away and drag us with it, right? And so we have to be intentional about how we use our gifts, intentional of what these things mean. Now, if this is making the walk of faith seem harder than it needs to be, I apologize for that. That's not what I'm trying to say. But the walk of faith is not easy. It is much harder to not have faith, because why live? What is there to live for outside of knowing that you have a purpose of being in existence, aside from just being a parent or a child or a sibling or a friend? There needs to be, there's that God-shaped hole in each person's heart, and we do need to keep that that is a true place. And people who go through struggling in their faith, that is a normal process for thinking people, and people who are wondering or have had a rough couple of years. And I have some friends, that are kind of in a place of struggling with their faith, because they're just sick of the whole rigmarole of the hustle and the productivity and the way that the formula of the way certain religious settings has sort of presented, here's how to love God, where the Torah spells out what's a sin and what's not a sin. But then there's this other way of, like, what is life like? How do we just live our lives? I know this might seem a little bit like a jumbled message, and it's funny because it's like I'm sitting here holding this little dog, and I just love him so much. And it's funny that my love for this dog, this little pet, distracts me from talking to you about love, because I'm experiencing it as I'm sitting here with my little baby. And then it's like, I can't even look at him. He's like, oh, like, please do not look at, he is so loving my love. But anyway, I'm experiencing love, right? And it distracts me from even being able to talk about it. Because I think one of the biggest things about intentionality is to do it. Is to do love, not just talk about love, right? Or insult different forms of behavior or whatever. Like, that isn't my goal either. But today's portion is every year always a challenge for me, because it's hard to talk about intention, even my own. Like, I am not sure. Sometimes it takes me days to tease apart, like, what was my intention there? Now, there are times I can say, my intention was to protect myself, and I said X, Y, and Z. Okay, then I have to go through reconnaissance of myself and intel in my own world to be like, well, did you have a reason to protect yourself? Yeah, that person's not safe. Like, okay, so you did the thing to protect yourself, and what was your intention? Oh, yeah, so my intention was to protect myself from this unsafe person. Were you manipulative? A little, to protect myself. Okay, so were you honest? No, not quite, because I was worried about the wrath of this person. So then I have to go back and re-engineer this system and get back to what the original intent was. What did I want? I wanted to have a good relationship with this person, and it didn't work out because they struggle with this particular area that happens to be my strength, and I just don't know how to deal with it. Or it could be vice versa. That could have happened where a person felt that way about me. And so intention is tough for me. I don't judge it in others. I really don't. I would say that's a strength that I've learned being a therapist over all these years, is not to judge intention. At the same time, I have to be careful that I don't, I have to remember not to judge my own, but to also learn what my intention is. Because sometimes when you peel away all these behaviors, you get back down to that baseline from which you operate and say, I don't think my intention was pure there. So I do need to revisit this. And we need to sit in that and listen and figure it out. And sometimes we will come to the conclusion that our intention was good. And then you have to say, okay, so I did my best. It didn't work out. It's not my gig. I'm not going to stress out about that anymore. I'm going to just let it go. Just let it go. You had a good intention. What didn't work out, you don't think? I think the Father is working something out. When we have pure intentions and something goes wrong, it's really going right. Because there's some other thing, some other work he's doing. Because all things work toward the good for those who believe and are called to his purpose. Because that's the Father's intention. The Father's intention is to reconcile and to restore all things. That's his intention. He states it very clearly. And one of the reasons we obey the Torah is to help other people see how safe he is, that he provides a good home and they're invited in. And so evangelism, from my perspective, is just like obeying the Torah, right? And part of just all of that is like loving your little pet, and hugging and being with your little pet and just making dinner and just taking a walk and calling your friend and checking up on people and dusting. I mean, you're right. So life, right? All of life is really worship, is really that covenant with the Father between you and him, of the intentionality of your life, and that I just do my best. And on the days that I just feel like I'm rebellious and I'm not going to do my best, well, I'm gonna sow not the best outcome for not the best investment, right? Of investing me. So yeah, and this is always an interesting portion. I'm probably going to look up what I talked about last year, because I always find it interesting to find from year to year the things that pop out at me. But this year, intention popped out at me about what's intentional. And then my dog is here, totally distracting me. And I'm thinking, oh, my intention is like, I want to talk and share about intention and love, but I'm very distracted. But so I want to do both at the same time. I want to help my little dog, who like is old and needy and lonely and misses his favorite person, which is my husband. And at the same time, I just want to talk to you, and I want to be a minister of reconciliation, right? I want to be a person that encourages you to know your Father loves you, and no matter what, he is restoring you. And as you make mistakes and you deal with consequences, he'll restore you. And as he blesses you with things that are like colds, he might bless you with a cold, and you might need to slow down. Just understand your Father loves you. He's very, very good. He's always very good. So anyway, that was kind of what comes to my mind, comes to my heart on this matter. The priests and the priesthood and the temple, it's all so fascinating. I love learning about it. I teach on it, on the temple, to the extent that there's attachment principles, I believe, rituals and things about the temple that are so spectacular. But I don't really get into like temple teaching, because I learn from like Rico Cortez and Dina Dye are my favorites. And I could just listen to them for days and days. And Joseph Good, he's another really good one. I've been to a conference that Rico put on and Joseph Good taught, and it was really neat. But when you think you know someone's intentions, realize you're not being humble, because you are not appreciating the self you were given. You're trying to be like God, knowing the difference between good and evil. You don't know. Your eyes will be opened and you won't understand what you're seeing. You'll feel naked and ashamed. And so don't do it. Don't go there. Don't try to wear the shoes of God. Don't try to wear the clothes of God. You are not God. You're not in control. You don't know the difference between good and evil. You know how to do your best and learn from when you make mistakes, and you don't want to miss the mark, but you want to obey the Torah. You don't want to judge others' intentions nor your own, though you want to evaluate them so that you can say, okay, Father, I've evaluated my intentions very honestly, and I don't think I approached that with the right intention. So I'm repenting. What should that mean? I'm returning to the image you made me, which says I can do all things through Yeshua, who gives me strength, which means I can approach this with the right intention. The person can't receive anything you're saying, just that you did your best. But do be honest with yourself and step back and evaluate your intentions, and do it in a safe, quiet place. And don't process that with other people until you're ready. And if you know what, you're not perfect. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to approach things with the wrong intention. That is not unique to you. You're not that special in terms of like, I did things no one else does. I mean, I'm not saying people don't do worse things than other people, obviously, but intention is a big word, and it's not a word we should trifle with or play with like lightly, right? Like this little dog's intention right now. What is his intention? He's an animal, right? We have an animal side to us, but what does he want? I just want to be the focus, he says, right? So, but we're a step above the animals. We're not equal to the animals, right? And so we are not always going to be the focus of everything. And don't overthink and think everybody's always thinking about everything you're doing. A lot of times people aren't thinking about you at all. So we don't want to overthink, underthink. And I have been a massive overthinker. So yes, every year where I have to think about these intentions, or I have to work on intentions. I mean, it's a huge attachment principle to know what you don't know, and to understand that if you just do your best and you have a good parent, he's going to take care of you. He's going to, I'm going to put little doggy down because I think I showed him that he's very important. So now he knows he's so important that I am completely covered in dog hair. Okay, good. There you go, buddy. Okay, well, anyway, on the 27th of this month of March, we have our 10-year anniversary for where Lamb Messianic Radio started. So come on, I think it's 1 to 4. So come on and check that out and see if you can. Here, let me see here if I can get my. Oh, no comments. I didn't even have them on. Okay. But anyway, I just hope that you get to go and see that, because I think it'll be really interesting. So anyway, I appreciate you intentionally showing up here, talking or listening to me talk, seeing my little dog, dealing with my distractions, forgiving me for it. And yeah, but there's a reason for that. I'm sure I'll figure it out. And anyway, okay, cute dog. I'm going to come. I'll bring you out now. All right. Thank you for coming. And remember, the future begins now. Bye.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.